All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Squash Canada's Coach Professional Development webinar series. We're back again today with another great topic being presented by Squash Canada's High Performance Director, Martin Heath. We're looking forward to this topic, developing high performance habits. Just a couple of ground rules for the webinar. If you have questions, by all means, put them in the chat and I will ask Martin those questions at the end. Or if it's an important question you want to ask throughout the presentation, I know Martin doesn't mind. And by all means, unmute your microphone, ask the question, and then just mute your microphone. Throughout the presentation, please do your best to keep your mics muted unless you're asking the question and your webcam's off. Other than that, we look forward to the presentation and we hope you enjoy. And I will now turn it over to Martin.
Thanks, Jeff. Hey, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. What better thing to do with a very nice day than sit inside and listen to a Scottish guy talk about squash. So anyway, so today's topic is developing high performance habits. I suppose it's easy to say just about, have some more discipline, but I've tried to come at it from a slightly different angle. Maybe even looking at laziness or efficiency as being some kind of maybe beneficial in some way, but just how to navigate around that anyway. Next slide, Jeff, please. So just to give a quick overview of what we're trying to achieve, you're trying to create simple, repeatable habits that contribute to improvements with minimal conscious effort. I mean, that's ultimately what you're doing when you're creating habits. You just want them to happen without you really putting in the effort, like brushing your teeth in the morning or at night. What I tend to find is the number of steps towards doing habits, the less the number of steps, the easier it is to repeat over and over and over again. The more steps there are, if you have to get your toothbrush out from a drawer, you have to pull out your toothpaste from somewhere else, you have to unscrew it, and there's a lot of steps that just because, at some point when you're very lazy, you don't feel like it, you're just not going to do it. If it's easy, everything's just at hand, then it's easy. So using that example, I mean, that's really what you're trying to do with all of these kind of habits, and try to make them great habits, simple, efficient, and easy to repeat. And you really, what you're trying to do is to create these it's easy if you have intrinsic motivation. I mean, if you want to achieve anything, if you're really intrinsically motivated, it's very simple. You just put your head down and get on with it. You'll do it anyway, maybe even independent of the number of steps, you're going to do it anyway. So we're trying to create habits that even a lot of the students you're going to coach, they might not have that, or at least very strong intrinsic motivation. So you're trying to create things that they can just incorporate into their life anyway. And simplifying the goals and practices, and when you actually are doing the activity, try to focus on it. What that really does is that it kind of accelerates the learning process. And it's so if you're kind of distracted, and what I put in the last one there, just put away your phone. If you're distracted and you're trying to do a particular task, you'll do it very badly over a long period of time, and you won't get much out of it. But if you're very focused on it, just even a few minutes of very focused effort or something will produce great results. So next slide. So what are the high performance habits we're trying to get? So I'll go into a little bit more detail with these in the next couple of slides, but just to kind of give a quick overview, you need to have a growth mindset. You need to believe that, and I'm talking to you like this is you, but obviously you're going to talk to your students about this. But you want your students to have the belief that they can grow, that they can get better at something. There's no fixed idea that, okay, this is how good I am at something and I can't really be that good. It's like you got to have an understanding that if you put in enough work, you will get better. And it's just a matter of, it might not be a linear progression, but it is a matter of putting in the work and it will pay off, and you can change yourself. I think it's quite important for kids to know that it is possible. And I suppose that's one of the good things about having good role models, is that it's like, oh, that person's just like me, but they just focused and put in effort and then they did something pretty cool. So I think they got to have that understanding that they can grow. And constant improvement is a mindset and lifestyle. So when you think of just improving at something, that thing will influence everything else. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail about this, but you know, once you get into that mindset of, okay, I want to be better, I want to be better at something, or these three things, I want to be better at it, then that, well, as long as that's simple enough, then that can define a lot of the things around that without trying to be very, very disciplined and control everything. Get that central theme sorted out, and a lot of things fall into place. Another thing about that you see with top athletes and high performers is they're not satisfied. They always think they can do better. So they're always improving, always trying to, and the dissatisfaction will actually lead them to, you know, whether it's losing a match or whether it's just not achieve, you know, they don't quite hit the targets that they want, or they just don't feel their technique's quite good enough, their movement's not quite good enough. They're always looking to improve, and it's that dissatisfaction that drives that in some way. So when it comes to motivation, you know, regularly reassess motivation. You find that high performers do this all the time, and it's not always, you know, you can look at a lot of high performers and it's not always very positive attributes that they have that drives them. A lot of the time it's you know, they're creating things. You're just creating things to try to motivate yourself. It's very difficult to have that kind of, you know, inward glow of intrinsic motivation all the time. And it doesn't have to be there in some regards to be a very high performer, but you're also looking at other things to drive you all the time. And it doesn't always have to be positive. It can be some negative things that you put in there. And as long as that drives you towards getting better at something, then it's okay. So you tend to find that high performers will do this. They'll just chuck everything into their motivation, whatever it is, and use that to drive them. As everyone knows here, it's that extra little bit, the extra 5% that makes all the difference. Just as a kind of simple example, it's so I think they recently discovered that when you're doing weight training, it doesn't really matter whether you do heavy weights or light weights for muscle growth. It's actually the extra few reps that you do that when you're at real fatigue, it's those extra ones that make the difference. It doesn't matter whether it's heavy and less reps or light and a lot of reps. It's those extra few just when you're very tired that will make the big difference. So that's something that you can, that's something that exists across all, you know, all activities. So when it comes to creating habits, your preparation, make that automatic, make it efficient, make it automatic. So having a very set structure about how you prepare for the activity that you're going to do, whether that's training or playing. But that once it's consistent, once you know what to do, once you don't have to think too much about it, there's not so many steps to achieve, then it's very repeatable. The focus in what you're doing, again, it comes down to this kind of efficient or / laziness thing, is that the more you focus on a certain thing, the better you will do it, and you will do it for less time. So if you manage to zone into that deep learning space, you will get a lot of benefit with, well, maybe not less effort initially because there's a lot of preparation. But once you have all the habits set up, then you know how to focus in that moment. It's very simple. A lot of the changes you can make and a lot of the learning will be in that very focused period, just a few minutes even. And then recovery also is, you know, the way that you recover from what you're doing is very important. You're not going to be able to repeat it again and again if you don't recover well. But making these things automatic, having a very set structure about preparing, focus, and then recovery is very important, obviously. Another thing with top performers, I don't know in other fields, but certainly in squash, is the ability to be able to juggle between a narrow and a wide focus. And that exists in practice and training and in matches as well. And it's a skill that you can apply in other ways, but that's something that squash players, high level squash players, definitely have the ability to be able to zone in, but then kind of pan out and see what's going on, and then kind of fit it back in. So I'll go into a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. Jeff, can we just change? So this just kind of breaks down what I was saying, just the mindset. You're believing in the process. It's not linear, but it'll yield positive results. When you've got improvement, just this kind of like when you're motivated to improve in some way, and then that influences everything. So in terms of squash, if you want to be a better squash player, then that as long as you're focusing on the simple idea of like you want to get better, then that will ultimately influence nutrition, sleep habits, lifestyle choices, like whether you're drinking too much or not, and that dissatisfying feeling that motivates you as well. So next slide. And as I said about motivation, this is a good guy to listen to in this development. There's a lot of in that kind of space, this kind of self-help space. A guy called David Goggins, incredible guy. But there's a lot of people with this message, but he seems to be the one with that message. And it's not like you're going to turn yourself into David Goggins, but the idea that you can take all of this, a lot of negativity and self-doubt and anxiety and failure, and you can use that and just chuck it into, just to kind of, you motivate yourself by trying to overcome all these things. So you kind of chuck that into your kind of motivation bucket, and you try to push through it. And it's an interesting idea. Is that rather than motivation being, I want to achieve this, it's a positive thing. So it's quite an interesting idea and quite effective to be able to put a lot of the negative stuff in there. So that's I think probably fairly new, but I think it's certainly a good message to give to your students. So they don't feel restricted. They feel as though they can use this stuff to their advantage rather than get restricted by it. And then, as I said before, the 5% effort thing, that's huge, and that's something that you will find with all high performers, is that extra little bit. Well, that's what is easy to give up. It's that extra resolve, like the mental and the physical and neurological benefits you get when you do that. That will make all the difference. That makes 100% of the difference. Next slide. So just a little bit more about the preparation, focus, recovery. I mean, when you're focused on something, and again, it doesn't have to be squash, but when you're starting your day, just have an idea in your head. It doesn't even need to be for 10 minutes. It can be for 20 seconds, but just relax and think about what you're trying to achieve for the day. So in terms of training, it will be, you want to become a better squash player by the end of the day. Or you want to, if you're, a lot of the students you'll be teaching, they'll be going to school, they might have another couple of activities, and it's just a way of mapping out, so that you feel as though your day is productive, and just a little quick moment to say, okay, what am I trying to achieve for the day? So it's good to, which gives a certain kind of structure about it. Even though you might not have a structure or two structure, it will define the overall improvement in some way. Warm up, predictable, as we said before, the ability to focus for deep learning, and then the recovery for the wind down. Next slide. So I've just given a couple of examples with squash between the oscillation between the narrow and the wide focus. So narrow in terms of technique. Well, in terms of breaking down the game, you're trying to chunk up everything into simple skills, and then you're going to practice those skills. So you need a narrow focus you need a wide focus to recognize them, or you need a coach. And then when you've got the skill you need to practice, then you need that narrow focus of practicing it. When you go through, when you're trying to figure it out and you're trying to adjust, it helps to kind of then at that point have a slightly wider focus, so you can try things out. You're not necessarily trying to hit so many targets right at the start. It's not about hitting targets when you're trying to figure out technique. It's about trying to be adaptable and flexible and have small changes. So you need a slightly wide focus, even if you're doing a narrow focus technique or narrow focus idea. But you still need a wide focus to be able to adjust. And then when you have the technique, then you want to give it some limitation. That's when you have the target practice. That's when you want to hit no mistakes on your boast when you're doing boast and drive, or when you're hitting your drive, you want to hit 28 out of 30 or 30 out of 30 balls. So hit the floorboards first before the side wall. So once you have the technique, the movement, once you have those basic techniques, and you feel as though you don't need to adjust them too much, then that's when the target practice comes in. That's the narrow focus. And in a match, I mean, what you're doing is that you're always oscillating in and out, from shot in the rally to the overall game. You're always oscillating in this kind of, you're in the middle of a rally, you're feeling you've got this kind of wide focus in terms of, how you're feeling, how your opponent's feeling, the overall tactical awareness of the game. But then the ball pops up, and then it's the narrow focus of feet in position, racket in position, what's my shot, boom, you play your shot. So you need to it's this kind of constantly focusing in, focusing out, focusing in again. So I think it's not so much in terms of again, we'll kind of recap at the end of this in terms of how you can help your students. I think it's more about defining that. It's more about defining how what the kids are trying to achieve, what kind of focus they have when they're doing a certain activity, rather than, okay, go and hit 30 of these or 100 of these and don't hit the 10 or don't hit the side wall. Is that you still need to have some sort of flexibility to be able to get something initially. So next slide. So a couple of tips about how to build these habits. The toothpaste example is that eliminate the number of steps. So this, in terms of preparation, focus, recovery, you're looking to eliminate the number of steps there. If it's very complicated, then if you're very disciplined, you have intrinsic motivation, you're going to do it because that's really what you want to do. But for it to be repeatable and maybe your intrinsic motivation is not there as much, or it oscillates in some way, you want to make things as simple as possible so they become habitual and repeatable and easy and efficient. And so whatever you can do, I mean, that's kind of up to you in that regard. I'm sure a lot of you do this anyway. But in how you give tips to kids to prepare and focus and recover and things like this. But it's the more simple they are, the easier they are, the less barriers, the less steps, the more repeatable they'll be. In terms of exercise, I mean, so the real learning will obviously be in probably more the intense exercise, the real training effect will be either that intense physical activity or it will be intense focus. But you also need to do the low and moderate impact stuff to prepare and maintain things like this. One thing that I've done for quite a while now is just, if you're trying to, if you have to go to the gym to work out, for example, you have to get all your clothes ready, you have to get in the car, you have to drive to the gym, you got to park, you got to go in, you got to change, you got to do your exercise and shower and go. There's so many different steps. Whereas if you can just get for the low and moderate impact stuff, why not make it automatic? So we just, you can get out your bed and you can just do the activities that you need to do, and it's right there. There's almost no steps to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. So again, for the high intensity stuff, the high focus stuff, I'm not recommending that necessarily. But for the stuff that you have to do, the stuff that's habitual, the maintenance, the low and moderate impact stuff, the less barriers there are, the easier it is, the less steps, the more repeatable they'll be. So I suppose in terms of, you're going through COVID right now, and all your kids are going through COVID, is that, they obviously have to have a home workout, but it's quite good to be able to get them to repeat that after the COVID situation either calms down or find a vaccine, whatever's going to happen. So like having some routine there where you don't have to think about it. You just get out of bed and this is what you do. You breathe, you exercise. It doesn't have to be a high impact. This is a little trick that I used when I was a pro athlete. Was that when I would go for a run, let's say, I would start off walking. I would start off, just very simple walking, then a slow jog, and then all of a sudden after 15 minutes you're running up hills. But if you're preparing yourself to run up hills right at the start, it's like, this is a hard thing to do. This is not easy to do. Again, with intrinsic motivation, you're going to do it, but it is going to waver. It's going to wane in some way. It's easy not to do it. So you're always looking to trick your mind in some way to, so that it doesn't feel as though that's that bad. It's okay, it's easy. It's just easy to go for a walk. Okay, it's easy to jog a little bit. It's easy to go a bit faster, and then the high intensity exercise takes place after that. So this is kind of like I haven't put that down here, but that's actually not a bad little tip as well, just for anyone. What else? Yeah, when you're use your warm-ups. So it's a good time to be able to engage your brain as well, and to focus on your breathing and to relax your body. So whether that's in the morning, little warm-up in the morning, or whether that's the warm-up before training, just that kind of the breathing. You're not checking your phone, you're not having a conversation and listening. I mean, of course you can do these things if you want, if it helps. But it's also quite good to be able to bundle things together. So if you can get focused on your breathing, you can also sort of go through things in your head that you need to do that day, or you need to achieve that day, while at the same time warming up and getting ready to exercise. It's just a more efficient way of doing things. So I think all those first four are basically about efficiency and less steps. What also helps for high performance is that you need to be able to know that you can achieve high performance. And so it's quite good to have like a boot camp every now and again. So I've said something about 6 to 8 weeks and 3 to 4 days straight. If you train like that all the time, then your body will break down. I mean, that's just the nature of things. It's very difficult to be able to, you know, training is obviously the sequential process of kind of putting your body under stress, it kind of breaking in a little way, and then but not too much, and then you recover, it repairs itself, repairs stronger, and then you just this, you know, this kind of exponential process or linear process, I suppose. But it's, if you do too much, it's you're going to break down. You're not going to be able to recover and train again. But you do need to, so mentally, you do need to have this feeling that you can go through you need to understand what your body's capable of and what your mind's capable of. So every now and again, 6 to 8 weeks, you have a 3 to 4 days straight where you just go, excuse the expression, balls to the wall. I don't know a better expression than that, but you just go full out and you focus on this, and that's really, and really you're telling yourself, you're telling your nervous system, you're telling that kind of other part of your brain, the subconscious part, that okay, you can do this. You've got this inner confidence that you can go through this process. Not something you want to do all the time, but you tend to find high performers will go through this. They will test themselves, and so that they know they've got this confidence, but they're not going to do it all the time because it's not practical. So another thing is that you can make this fun as well. So cold showers are actually, and cold, you know, if you're lucky enough to be able to have a cold or an ice bath or something like this, very good for your vascular system. It actually helps your vascular system to tighten up and to become more efficient. And so but also in this context, really what you're trying to do is you're trying to build the mental toughness. So when you're talking about a 14-year-old kid wants to take a cold shower? I mean, no one wants to do it. But the ability to be able to withstand something very uncomfortable, and then to go through that process where your body then adapts to it and your mind adapts to it, then it's like, okay, it's easy now. You know, then you build this understanding that you've just got to go through the process of being uncomfortable, but you'll come out the other side, and you built that knowledge within yourself. So it's a very simple thing. Tickle fights is an unusual way to say it. So it's something that me and my son do, is that we'll just give our foot to the other one, and the other ones can tickle it for as long as they want. You're not allowed to move your foot. You're allowed a pillow over your face. And what happens is that it's just absolute hell for about 30, 40 seconds, and then your foot goes numb. But you have to handle that 30, 40 seconds. And the same with breath holding as well. You just, and these little kind of fun things to do they build that knowledge within yourself that you can handle being uncomfortable, and you'll come through it. You will adapt. Your body or your brain will adapt to it. It's quite important for kids to understand that they don't crumble just at the slightest bit of stress. I just give a little tip about the narrow focus, number 7. So I think as coaches, what you're trying to do is you're trying to define that. You know, it's just you know, do you give target practice? Do you count the number of you know, do you have this narrow focus when you're when you're trying to achieve something? Yes, you do, if you've already got the technique and the position and the movement and things like this. You want to give target practice and that narrow focus. But when you're trying some other things out, you're trying to you're trying to discover things, then you need to have a little bit more of a wider focus. So I think defining that for your pupils is going to be helpful for them, and it's going to help them focus on what's important rather than get confused. And it just as a reminder, number 8, it's just like making everything efficient, simple. Removing the number of steps and barriers to achieve what they want to achieve. With that will allow you to focus. And again, put away your phone. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but it's. I mean, I'm probably the worst at this as well. It's just always checking my phone. It's always in my hand. But when you're trying to, it's very useful to be able to just, okay, zip it up. This is what you're going to do at this time. You're going to focus on breathing, focusing on what you're trying to do, getting better at something. It's going to be difficult to get that deep learning period, that kind of intense period, if you're always thinking about what's next. Okay, your phone buzzes, and okay, who's contacting me? And so it's you need to be able to put your phone away. Next slide. So in practice, I think I went through a little bit of this in the last slides as well. Just a couple little tips. Again, you guys are probably in some areas here, you're definitely have more expertise than I have. But here's just something that I've discovered from either myself, watching other high performers, or coaching. Let your students know that you believe in their potential, even if they don't believe in themselves. I mean, that's that belief that is quite often surprises kids, and you know, and even if you don't necessarily think at the time, you got the belief in their own progress and their own ability to change. And you are, you know, your brain is adaptable, it is flexible. You just got to have this understanding that it is. And so I think investing that belief in your students is going to be huge for them. In terms of goal setting, I think it's you want them to be able to, you want to find out from them what their goals are. And it's not always going to be, you know, they want to be the best player, they want to, you know, a lot of it's going to be they just, okay, well, I just want to enjoy it, or I want to get into college, or, you know, they're going to have different goals. And I think that it's your job to be able to help them define what they are, and then to help them simplify it as well. And again, it doesn't have to be your coaches. It doesn't always have to be just about squash. It's kind of it can apply to a few other things. But help them simplify. It's difficult to be amazing at everything. It's like you need to be able to focus on like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and then really try to be as good at these things as you possibly can. It's difficult to be amazing at everything. And then like have that, you know, try to help them understand that this is, you know, once they define those simple goals, then to try to help them define, like have a feeling of that they want to improve. Okay, well, what do you need to do? How do you shape your day around getting better at these things? And it can be anything. It can be getting better at relationships. It can be better at, you know, hitting a forehand drive. It can, you know, but what do you do within your day to be better at those? And just that little bit of focus on, okay, well, maybe I need to go to bed a bit earlier, or maybe I need to eat a little bit better. And those little changes will obviously at some point start a process that will be a big change. So you need to give positive feedback to your kids, but it's important that they also think they can do better. So I think it's like, okay, you give positive feedback to them, but say, well, look, you know, I think you can do better. I think you can get better at what you're doing. As you know, don't be too satisfied. It's like, yeah, great, congratulations, you're doing this really well, you're doing that really well, but you can still get better. And that's true of everybody and everything. You can always get better. So I think it's positive feedback, but still like have that feeling that, okay, yeah, there's still things to work on. So, and again, what I said about the kind of the negative stuff, the anxiety and the failure, you know, it's different. You know, I don't know whether you get into that kind of that deep with your students. I think some of you probably do. And it's, you know, but I think it's a good piece of advice. It's just not kind of ignoring that stuff, you know, or not using, okay, squash is like your positive thing, and, you know, all this negative stuff is happening, and, you know, but so why not use that? You know, why not try to use that in some way? You know, and just to kind of use it as a kind of bulwark against all that kind of stuff, and just sort of chuck everything in there and use it as a motivating tool. I'm not an expert at that at all, but I think it's something that I think is actually quite useful. So, so you know, maybe something you can look at a little bit deeper and see if you can bring it into your coaching. You know, the extra, telling your kids that there's you know, that little bit extra, that little bit of extra effort just when they want to give up, you know, when it's easy to quit, that will make all the difference. And I think, you know, communicating to them that it's like, you know, is that extra 5%, but you get 100% of the benefit back from that. That's what separates you from everything else. That's what gets that's the deep learning. That's the kind of changes that you make in your body, your neurology, your mind. And it's like you're going to get huge amounts from that. And again, it's applicable with squash. Help them simplify. Once you establish goals, once you help them simplify their goals, then help them simplify their preparation, training, recovery. And again, it's like you're not looking for it. Too many steps, too long, it's not going to work. It's not going to be replicable. Simple and effective and replicable. That's replicable. That's the way to go. And obviously removing all the steps, the unnecessary steps. You know, there's you might want to have all this knowledge as a coach. You might want to help them to and to use all this knowledge to help them to be the best that they can be. But it's got to be habitual. So it's, that's, if once you have this as the kind of guiding force of what you're trying to communicate to your kids, then you're gonna find a simple way of doing and an easier way of doing things. It might not be maybe the best way, but not everyone has 24 hours in a day, and not everyone's a professional athlete that can devote towards this. They might be able to devote only a certain amount of time. So make it efficient, make it as good as it can be, and remove all the steps and barriers. And so again, I've fallen into this before, when you're doing a lot of coaching, this, rather than, okay, well, what do you want to work on today? It's like, try to help them try to define the practice before, try to understand your students before, and then define that narrow and the wide focus, or the mixed focus, which is what you're attending to what you're practicing within games. You're always looking at the zone in, zone out. So I think just an understanding of this, and then communicating that to use it in practices, and then communicating that to your students, and making a thing. This is now a thing. There's that where it's narrow focus here, it's wide focus here, it's mixed focus here. So bring it into your coaching. I think it's going to be helpful. It's going to be helpful for your students, definitely. The fun tools, I think it's something different that you can use. I use them. I think they're fun things to have. It's very helpful, and again, it's easy. Like if things are fun, they're easy, and they'll be replicable in some way. They can make them habitual in some way. And then what I said about the exercise habits is that try to help them to add these things to their daily routine. And again, simple, less, not many steps. But then to use that, and that will essentially be when you've got a match at night, whether it's a league match or whether it's or training at night. If you do that little bit, 20 minutes in the morning, then your body's going to be more ready to do that activity later on. You're probably going to need less of a warm up, or your body's just going to be neurologically and probably just you'll just feel better. Like everything will feel better for that training later on. And there's obviously, a lot of these people you're coaching, they're going to go to school or they're working, but just getting them to do that little bit of thing right at the start of the day is going to help. It's going to help everything. So I think that's all I have. Yeah, I'll take any questions. I don't think there was a lot of content. I think I repeated myself a lot. I think there's some simple things in there that are helpful. Most people probably know this stuff already, but certainly I'll answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, we're going to open the floor now to questions. If you have a question, please by all means unmute your microphone and ask, or type it in the chat and I will ask on your behalf.
Hello. Not so much a question, but something that popped up from one of the concepts of training and winning. And a quote that I'm going to ask my students is asking them about, is winning easy or is winning comfortable? And what I got from Martin is just a simple definition of, wow, yeah, winning is not comfortable. The amount of sacrifice and pain and pressure and training that we go through. Just thank you for making that pop up.
Cheers.
Any other questions? Anything at all? By all means, ask away. Martin is here to answer anything you'd like.
Hello, Martin. It's Sebastian here from Moncton.
Hey, Sebastian.
I'm just curious about how to define like overtraining versus a comfortable amount of training. Like if you train 5 days a week and take 2 days off, and if you feel your body's rested on the Monday, that can work for you. But that doesn't necessarily work for your students. Or like I have some keen squash students that I'm trying to measure the amount of work they should be putting in, and I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to overtrain them, and I don't want to use myself as an example because I train really hard. So are there tools that I can, indicators that you can share?
Okay. I mean, it's a tough problem to have, I would say, because it's, especially if you're training groups, you always tend to defer to the person that has the the lowest tolerance for training, right? I mean, that's kind of like, that'll happen in group training. So if that is the case for what you're saying, then you need to be able to provide extra training for the ones that need it, or a higher intensity. Yes, I would say it's probably quite good to get your students to start listening to their body. I would say that that's probably quite a good thing. Again, you don't want them to be overly sensitive, and you definitely want them to be resilient and practice some of these little tips, or and tricks for resiliency, or the other ones that you have yourself. I would say that's you definitely want to have that, but you also wanted, like, good athletes are always very aware of their own body, and they're not going to throw, like, lots and lots of work on. It's not just about lots and lots of work. It's about preparing your body for these moments where training can happen. And so I think I did one for one of these webinars for, I think it was mostly juniors actually, but it was a kind of a hack about how to train. It was the training process. And it's that you don't really need that. I mean, you've got a lot of different systems to train in squash, but you don't really need a lot of work to be able to train one system. You just need to be able to prepare your body, and then an intense period of training, and then obviously you've got to get the recovery right as well. But it doesn't take a lot to be able to train. It just takes intensity. So I think it's what tips is a tough question to answer, because I don't really have a good answer for you, actually. I would say that you can do less, but you need to be able to make it a little bit more intense. So you can adjust the intensity, get people to be able to understand how they're feeling, how they feel on that particular day, if it's and why they're feeling like that. If they haven't eaten, they haven't drunk enough fluids, or they haven't done their let's say your morning workout, or your little workout. If you haven't done these things, then you're not going to be prepared. But if you have, and they're going to monitor themselves as being, okay, I feel 6 out of 10. I don't feel that great. Where other people will feel like 8 or 9 out of 10. It's like, okay, well, they can go through the intense exercise. So I would say discover why those people are feeling 5 out of 10. Help them, so that help them add a little couple of tools, and just prepare better. Carry a water bottle with you. Make sure you eat or carry snacks with you, so you're ready to train. Right. But then when then so that's something I do before training. Is okay, well, how give yourself a mark out of 10. Like, how do you feel? So what professional organizations, national organizations, they will do a lot is they'll test the urine and see how dehydrated you are. And that will determine if you're dehydrated, and then you put intense training on top of it, you're actually going to have a negative effect. It's not going to work for your body. So I mean, can you sort of self-monitor and find out how you're feeling, and whether there's any benefit to train really hard that day? I would say there's probably some benefit to doing that. So I don't know whether that answers your question, Sebastian.
It does, and I mostly coach one-on-one right now, so it's a good way to make sure people don't overdo it, is to just listen to their bodies on that given day, because it will vary from day to day.
Right. And don't use it as an excuse for being lazy, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, Martin, we have some questions here in the chat. So the first question, I'm not sure if this is from Sam Cornett or Sam Chan, but the question is, can you elaborate on the breath holding that you were talking about?
So, breath, I can just tell you what I do. So breath holding is basically, I mean, as a kind of activity, I mean, the whole point of me bringing this up was actually about you understanding your impulses to quit, or to, the cold shower's too cold, you don't want to get in it, or you don't want your feet tickled. It's the same principle with the breath. It was, just when you feel like your body can handle way longer. You have enough oxygen in your brain and your body to be able to handle way longer than you think you can. So being able to push through, you're not going to, die of hypoxia if you push through another 20 seconds, but being able to ignore those impulses to be able to do that. I mean, that's actually a process that just builds it just builds mental toughness and resiliency, and so that's the concept I was trying to get across. It wasn't so much about specific exercises. I can tell you what I do. A good guy to listen to is a guy called Wim Hof, a Dutch guy. That he's the Iceman. Some people may have heard of him. And he has a way of breathing where you can oxygenate your body prior to, but then you hold your breath. Even without a breath, you can hold your breath, just a neutral breath, and you can hold it for 3 times as long as you think you can. So that's something that I do. I think, and he's got a bunch of different breathing exercises that you can do for, which can help you in some way, whether you want to calm down or oxygenate your body in some way. So I would say Wim Hof, he's a good guy to listen to. But the whole idea of talking about this is just about the idea of being able to handle uncomfortable moments and realize that, oh, you have way more tolerance for pain and discomfort than you think you have. That's your first response. That's your body's first response. It's always concerned about its own safety and comfort, and your senses tell you this, but it's not always the right thing. You've got to listen to it, but you can choose to ignore it as well. So just that knowledge is it's a high performance habit. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. It's that's what high performers do. They're not just responding to every little sensation they have. They're aware of it, because you have to be aware, but they know how to ignore it as well. So again, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's yeah. I mean, it's useful. It's definitely useful to have breath holding competitions, or just to kind of get people to do that. I wouldn't do it in the bath, just in case. But I think you can certainly do it at home, and you can just practice and see how long you can hold your breath. It's another little thing that you can add to your training.
Okay, great. So next question, Martin, is from Lolly Gillen. She asks, do you use these steps / philosophies with an injured athlete? So do you scale them back?
Hey, Lolly, do I use them with injured athlete? Yeah, of course. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, you could high performance habits. So you're developing high performance habits. So a high performance habit in that regard would be understanding that there's not going to be much benefit in training your body when or putting too much intensity into your body when you're injured. Like, you have to be able to rest up. So that would be the recovery part. It's just being aware of your body, being aware of what's good pain and what is bad pain, like when you need to rest up. But at some point, I mean, as when you're recovering from let's say a knee operation, the feeling is, okay, I've got to rest up, but the doctor will tell you, okay, well, you actually have to get back, you have to get on it, you have to do this. And so it's a fine balance. I think there's a fine balance between knowing when to relax. That's obviously your first response is, okay, I'm injured, I got to rest up, I got to listen to my body, and I got to do the right things, got to eat well and rest. But then at some point you're going to have to get back on it. You don't want to atrophy in like too long. You don't want your bone density to be affected. And that's really what the doctors are trying to tell you when you're going through a recovery process. So would I apply my philosophy to it? Yeah, I mean, I would apply it in terms of listening to your body. But I don't know, I need to probably go through the slides to give you a more specific question. But listening to your body, and then the feeling that you kind of, at some point you still have to, you have to be able to tolerate a little bit of discomfort to when you're kind of getting back on the horse.
Okay, great. Thanks, Martin. So next question is from Giselle Delgado. She asks, how could one get better at the narrow and wide focus shifts off court?
Okay, so I didn't actually provide anything. I think it's Giselle. I didn't provide any kind of specific techniques for that. I think being aware of it initially, I think that's the first thing, because it's a relatively new concept. It's something that squash players, high performance squash players know anyway. It's something that I was aware. So I was actually aware of this in business school. It's like, okay. There's people that can get deeper into, like very, very deeply into a problem because they're experts at what they do, and mathematics or in some way. But but it's very difficult for those people to withdraw themselves out of that problem. And I actually found that I was able to get into a problem, maybe not quite as deeply, but I could withdraw and then sort of have a wider focus. And I thought, well, you know, part of that's age, I suppose, but part of it, I think, was the skills that I learned from playing squash. So I think you pick up these skills anyway by playing squash. I think you all possess them. Your students will all possess them. I think what helps is defining it. So it just and I was always a little bit frustrated with squash coaching, where it was like, okay, you got to hit this many targets, and I'd be like, well, you know, when I actually prefer the feel of something. You know, I prefer like the feel of trying to hit, you know, like consistent forehand drives from the quarter court as hard as I can. Let's say, like, and I'm trying to hit the floorboards every single time. If I tighten up all my muscles to be able to achieve that, then that's what I'm learning. I'm learning I have to restrict movement to be able to achieve that. And I think you can only be so good at something when you do that. And I think that it's far better to be able to loosen, to relax, to have this little bit of a wider focus, okay, and to be able to kind of observe like where you're going wrong, and then to slightly adjust and to adjust from a position of relaxation, rather than adjust, because it's going to be very difficult to adjust when everything is tightened up. So I think that's where you can use it, is in technical, when you're trying to get people to adopt new techniques, or to try and achieve a certain thing. Initially, I think it helps have that wider focus and relax as much as possible. And then once you have it, then it's like, okay, now you know that you can, you know, you want to be very disciplined and have a very narrow focus on what you're trying to do. You want to hit every single floorboard on that straight drive. So I think that's, you know, being able to tell your students that particular thing. Okay, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes when you're trying something different. It's okay to make mistakes when you go into a new court. But adjust, relax, adjust. Once you get it, then you can have that narrow focus. And I think it's the same when you're playing a match. You know, you kind of, you know, at the end of a rally, you want to have this wide focus. You want to be able to listen to your body, observe, you know, listen to your breathing, how you're feeling, look at your opponent, how are they feeling, you know, have an understanding of the atmosphere of the match, so that you can then make good tactical adjustments as you go. So in between rallies, you want this wide focus. When you're in a rally, you might want to be, you know, I suppose you're always oscillating in between. But let's say when you played a rally, the ball pops up. Now you have this, you know, you've got this chance of hit. You don't want to necessarily have, you know, 3-4 different options on that ball. You want one option, and you want to just nail it into where you want to nail it. And so I would say you need to have a little bit of narrow focus just before you hit the ball. That you've made that decision. This is what you're going to do. So I think, you know, rather than me giving you specific exercises that you can do to practice this, I think what I've said, I think it's just the technical analysis. You know, when you first start something, you first go into a new court, have some flexibility about that. It's not about tightening everything up. It's loosening up, accepting errors, and then when you get it, then very narrow, and then between the rally, you know, wide focus, in the rally, a little bit more narrow focus, and then very narrow focus when the ball pops up. I would say that's being able to tell that, identifying that, and communicating that to your students. I think that's going to be helpful.
Great, thanks, Martin. So next, this may be more of a statement as opposed to a question from Melanie Jans. She says, resting heart rate is a good way to give you an indication of how hard you can push that day. Take your heart rate in the morning. Am I at resting? Great, push hard. Any additional comment to that, Martin?
Hey Mel, yeah, I think that's right. I think that's how a lot of athletes use that as well. If they don't have the ability to be able to get the urine analysis, the heart rate tells them that. Yeah, it tells them how rested you are and whether you're capable of training. So finding a baseline, and again, you can make that a habit as well, where you just take your heart rate in the morning and see how you feel, and that's going to give you a good idea whether you can train later on. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
Okay, next question is from Sean O. How did you apply this idea, high performance habits, to your varsity players when you were in Rochester? Could you share some examples?
I don't know whether that's the best example is in with college players, because you've got so many different I would say that the warm up is the biggest thing, because I would say that's what I try to, and because what you're doing is you're going from, you know, sitting down in the classroom or studying or, you know, and then interacting with your friends and you know, you're already in this campus environment. You're going from that, and then you're going to ask people to, you know, run around the squash court and do all sorts of athletic activity, and so you need to have this transition between doing this, you know, to that. And so that in that transition, you know, you're obviously warming up, you're getting your cardiovascular system ready, you're warming up your body, you're kind of getting your neurological system going, you're preparing your mind for what you're going to try and do, and getting your body prepared. So I think that transition is very, very important. If you're just going from one thing to the next, then you're not going to have a training effect. You're going to risk injury. You're not going to get that deep learning in anything that you're doing. So the preparation that you do for something is, I think, is one of the biggest things that you can do. And again, it's like, you know, the training effect isn't, you know, 10 to 15 to 20 minutes of good quality training and good focus is worth, you know, 100 hours of just, you know, moderate intensity, or just not, you know, doing things where you're not prepared for. So I think that's something that that's a high performance habit that I definitely brought to varsity sport. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. I could probably think of, you know, if I had more time, I could give you a lot of other things, but I would say that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay, a couple of last questions come from Janet McLeod. Actually, the first one is more of probably a statement, going back to your the questions Lolly had around injured athletes. Janet states, "I ask my athletes to understand their bodies by understanding the difference between pain, so does it impede function, and what is uncomfortable and just pushing through." So I think that's a great statement for any coach to understand, as well as their athletes. And then Janet's question is, would you encourage young athletes to keep a training journal as part of building habits, or does that go against your idea of simplifying their training and preparation?
It's a great question. And you know, I'm kind of using myself as a bit of a baseline because I think I'm probably naturally lazy, but I don't think. I think it's actually helped me to be successful in some way, you know, and you know, of whatever, you know, a very small way, obviously, but I think it's that whatever successes I've had, it's actually probably been from that baseline where I've found the most efficient way of doing something. So I would say as a baseline, it's probably, you know, and not everyone is like that. Some people are motivated. Some people are just incredibly disciplined, or just, you know, they're on the go from the moment they wake up until the moment they sleep. And it's, and this is just who they are. You know, I think there's a lot of successful, you know, I would say Shabana was definitely that. Jonathan Power was definitely like that. It's just that they find the most efficient ways of doing things. I think Jansha was like that as well. And I think a lot of athletes are. I mean, I think you just have to be. So do you keep a training log? I think I actually did think about this when I wrote the slides. And I thought you can do it simply. Yeah, I think it's simple. And I also thought about the apps that you can use. There's a lot of training apps out there, and I would say, you know, the good ones, yes. I would say if you can do it in the very simple way, it's very useful. And again, it's one of these things that you could probably do in your recovery. It's like you can make that part of your recovery. Okay, how do you know, what did you do? How do you feel? You know, what's the benefit? And again, you know, make the steps very, very simple. You can just keep a note on your phone and in the notes part or whatever. I think that's probably the way of doing it. You know, if you have to go through lots of steps and you have to email someone, or you have to put it into you know, into a log, and it's very complicated, then I don't think that's the right way of doing it. I think there probably are very efficient solutions. So yes, it is useful. If you can find a very simple way of doing it, then I think you should do it. Yeah, but again, it has to be simple.
Great, thanks, Martin. So taking into consideration the time, I think we will begin to start wrapping up. If anyone has additional questions for Martin, you can certainly reach out to the Squash Canada office and/or Martin. His contact information is on our website, and he is more than happy to answer additional questions as they come up. Just in closing, first off, thank you, Martin, again for your wonderful presentation on developing high-performance habits. Going forward, just a friendly reminder that we've just announced a new Squash Canada Coach PD webinar titled Building a Positive Parent Culture. This presentation is by Glenn Mulcahy of Paradigm Sports. I just sat through this presentation recently, put on by the Coaches Association of Ontario. It's a fabulous presentation on tips and tricks as to how you can deal with parents, engage your parents, and deal with them, but in a positive manner. And I highly encourage all of you to consider attending that. It is scheduled for Wednesday, June 10th at noon. Registration is now open. And then for your athletes as well as yourself, if you're interested, Martin will be back the next couple of weeks with his Hints webinar series. He will have one on junior squash to pro international squash on Thursday, May 28th at noon. And then he will be back on Thursday, June 4th at noon with mental training. I encourage you to register for both, as well as the Building a Positive Parent Culture if you are interested. Otherwise, we thank you for attending. The slides will be sent out this week, as well as I will enter this in your locker profile so you get your PD point for attending. Thank you again, everyone, and take care.